The schools may be gone, but the legends live forever. Welcome to the Final Jump Shot Podcast. Here's your host, Marcus Carlton.
The time has finally arrived, and here we are tipping off episode 1 of the Final Jump Shot Podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about the legacy of a Leachville Lion legend from the 1950s, Jerry Lee Atkeison. Now, this story is going to unfold from 3 different perspectives. First up, we're going to talk to Jerry's daughter, Amber, who will tell us about Jerry as dad and what it was like for her growing up to find out that dad was also a local legend on the hardwood. The second perspective we're going to get on Jerry Atkeison comes through the eyes of Jerry's younger brother, Mike. Mike is going to tell us what it was like having a very competitive hoops all-star as his big brother. And the final perspective we get on Jerry comes from a former teammate and lifelong best friend, Mr. Billy Darrell Carter. Episode 1 of the Final Jump Shot, featuring the story of Jerry Lee Atkeison, begins now. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are on the first episode of the Final Jump Shot, and the very first guest that we're going to have is a very old friend of mine from, I guess we worked together. It's been almost 20 years ago now, but I'm talking about Amber Atkeison. She is the daughter of the subject of our show tonight, Jerry Lee Atkeison. Amber, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Marcus. I'm honored.
Well, all right. So let's talk a little bit about your dad, but we're gonna talk about Jerry, the basketball player, first. Okay. So at what point did it become clear to you that, hey, dad's kind of a big deal?
Well, of course, when I was young and being from a small town, the town of Leachville, well, it was the other people that weren't in the family that told me about it first. They all came up and would have stories and would talk about Daddy playing ball. And I didn't realize until I started playing softball. Now, I did not get the basketball bug in our family. I was 12 years old and I was going to try out for junior high cheerleading. And I wanted to do what my friends were doing. And he's like, do you want to just yell about it? Or do you want to win? Do you want to do it? I wanted to be a cheerleader, and that broke his heart. He tried to intervene and have me play elementary basketball. And we didn't have a girls team. So I was even on the team with the boys, and that didn't take either. But bless his heart, he tried. But that was when I was starting to play sports. In the late 70s, he became our softball coach. And that's when I realized Dad was an athlete. Mm-hmm.
And so you said it was mainly people, outside of the family that would bring this to your attention. Was it kind of a, they were fans of your dad, or was it just, hey, did you know that your dad is like the dude?
There's one gentleman that comes to mind that would tell me he wanted me to know the stories. Was a local businessman, and it was kind of odd, and we didn't really know each other that well. He just knew me as, Jerry's daughter. Mm-hmm. And he said, Amber, and this wasn't that long ago, and now he's passed away, but he went, Amber, he said, your dad played so intense. How did he word it? Just that he was so competitive and so intense. He would get so angry that he would hold it in, but he would cry. And he said that to me.
Wow.
And I never really, I didn't like really knowing that, because I didn't know that side of my dad. Mm-hmm. Never saw my dad cry a day in his life, but I could see that. I could see he was competitive. Of course, then I started asking questions, and my mother was the homecoming queen, and Dad was the basketball captain. Her homecoming dress was later changed into her wedding dress. Just idyllic and just a great story. I just grew up knowing that Dad was a big deal in basketball. Of course, they told me all the Leachville basketball stories. It wasn't just Dad. It was the town of Leachville is mm-hmm. definitely a basketball town. We don't have football. So, basketball is king here. Mm-hmm. And the reason we don't have football is because it was an agriculture agricultural area, and we would have to, I think they let out in the fall to pick cotton. And football being played in the fall, you couldn't have a football team if you were having to let out to pick cotton before the machines, when it took a family to pick. So we never, that was my understanding. That's what I was told. That's why we did not have football, but we had basketball.
As you're learning about these stories from your dad, is he still was he still a basketball fan after his playing days, or was it, did it just not have the same? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, no. He now football, basketball, golf. Of course, golf became the sport that he still played. But no. He followed basketball and he followed football, and he a big Hawks fan. I was raised to be a Hogs fan,
sure.
And all our family was as well. But no, sports in general that was a big part of my growing up.
So, Amber, a few weeks ago when we were first talking about this interview and how we were going to do this, you sent me a couple pictures through Facebook Messenger. One was your dad in his uniform. I guess it'd be like, your individual pics when you get your team pictures made. And then you also sent, and I thought this was just extremely cool, it was the cover of the program from the 1957 All-Star Games presented by the Arkansas High School Coaches Association. You had a basketball game at Barton Coliseum, and then you had a football game at War Memorial Stadium the next day. And so your dad got to play in the basketball All-Star Game in Barton Coliseum. How cool is that?
Yes. My high school coach, who played ball against Daddy, kept that program all these years, Coach Bob White, and he gave me that. You can see that little sticker that's still on it. And I'm so thankful he kept that and gave that to me, because I've never seen it before.
Well, and that, to me, that says a lot about how much other players respected your dad. The fact that Coach White knew you and knew this is something that you would want, and that it would mean a lot more to you than it did him to have this. And to me, that's just really, really cool, and kind of speaks to the legacy that your dad had as a ball player. So we've talked about the ball player of your dad. Tell me a little bit about Dad away from basketball.
Dad away from basketball. He made a pharmacist. He became a pharmacist. He married his high school sweetheart. There are two of us. Myself and my brother. My brother's older. And then he didn't want to move back to Leachville after pharmacy school. He wanted to stay in Memphis. He went to pharmacy school at Memphis. Oh, this is fun. This is a fun fact.
Okay.
My parents got married during college, and he went to pharmacy school at University of Tennessee. My mother, being the seamstress, made band uniforms and was the lifeguard. She taught the football team, University of Tennessee football team, swimming lessons to pay for Daddy's tuition. And she said, and we had enough left over to buy a push lawnmower and a stand-up deep freeze. That's what she said. And then another story was, Mother was, what do you call the assistant, the teacher's assistant, TA? She was the teacher's assistant, and it was his last final in a pharmacy school, the last final. Mother typed up the test. And she said now, of course, she said this story back in the 80s, she said that would never happen now. Right. And of course, you can imagine his nerves, and he didn't know it. He didn't know anything about it. And so he studied, and of course, he passed the exam and became a pharmacist. And then that's when she told him, when he got his grades, his passing grade, is that she typed up the test. And she says she got quite the dirty look.
I bet, yeah.
He asked her, he said, why didn't you, I can't see his character saying, why didn't you tell me? But she said, Jerry, I knew I could never help you because you would never know that you could pass it on your own. He was just, but he always kept that competitiveness. It always goes back to sports, and I'm about to go back to sports again. When I got involved playing softball, and I was behind the plate. I was put behind the plate, and he said he watched that ball go back to the fence about 10, 20 times. And he decided he was going to have to get involved and coach us. I ended up on third base, sometimes left field, although I loved third base. But he took over, and we won district. We went to state. But the man knew sports, not just basketball. And he has a lot of young women back then, but I guess we're not so young anymore, that he sure was special too. He loved us and we loved him, and that was such a fun time, were my softball years.
To have, your teammates, like you were talking about, that, he meant as much to them as anybody did. I mean, that tells what kind of impact he made on those young ladies.
He really did. It was fun years, good years. He wanted to spoil me so bad, and my mother she was the one. She wasn't raised like that. She was wanting to make sure I wasn't rotten. So they didn't get together on co-parenting, I thought, enough on spoiling me. But anyway, but we were close, and he was so funny to me, and that dry sense of humor, and just sophisticated. And I mean, he ended up, I don't know how he went from Adam Levine to Sean Connery, but he did. That's what he looked like. And he was professional. He was very intelligent. He was on the quiet side, but had a great dry sense of humor. Sharp dresser. Daddy was a sharp dresser. Probably helped that my mother was such an award-winning seamstress, but he was just here's a word that I use. I don't know if everybody would see this side of him, but I thought he was an elegant man. I thought he was sophisticated. I have the best memories of my dad.
Well, joining me now on the Final Jump Shot is the brother of Jerry Lee Atkeison, Mike Atkeison. Mike, I appreciate you taking time to join us today.
Well, you're welcome. My pleasure.
So, growing up there in Leachville, you're Jerry's younger brother. Tell me, what are some of your memories about when Jerry was playing ball?
Well, he would play senior high basketball, and I was in junior high, and we lived about 2 miles, mile and a half, 2 miles from the gymnasium, just out of town. And we would walk on game days. We would walk to the gym and then play ball. And so we didn't think anything about it. It doesn't matter what the weather was. We would walk.
And so we're talking about during basketball season, and I mean, it wasn't always, like you said, wasn't always great weather. It's probably some pretty chilly walks during that time, wasn't there?
Yeah, it didn't matter. We dressed for the weather, and if it was raining, maybe I don't remember for sure. Well, maybe my mother would take us to the gym, but most of the time we just walked. And you asked me about the importance of basketball in Leachville. Every backyard had a basketball goal. It's just, that's how important it was. Everybody played basketball. We didn't have a football team. Didn't even have a track team. We just had baseball and basketball, and basketball was king. And our gymnasium would seat probably 2,000 people, and the population of Leachville at that time was only 1,700. So basketball was big.
Amber has told me a little bit about how, some of the stories that she heard is that not only was it Leachville people that would come to play, but there were people coming from even from out of state to come watch Jerry and his teammates play ball. Do you kind of remember some of that, some of those really, really big crowds, and hearing the stories about people coming from out of state?
No, I can't relate to that. I know people from nearby towns would come. People who wouldn't otherwise go to a basketball game would go to see Leachville play. And of course, Jerry was a big part of that. But those were good days. I really enjoyed it.
So what are some of the memories that stick out to you from not just from basketball, but just, just being brothers and growing up in a small community like that?
Oh my goodness. I could tell you lots of stories about being his brother. Some of them good, some of them not so good. He played the role. He was 5 years older than me, and he played the role of big brother down to the hilt. I knew my place, and he did teach me a lot of things about basketball. He did encourage me to play, and I did. I wasn't near as good as him, but he did help me in that area. We did everything together until he died. We played basketball. We played golf together until he died, and I guess that would probably be about 40 years together we played. I really enjoyed that. He was good to me. We got a lot of good times together.
Did those golf matches ever get very competitive?
Oh yeah, very, very competitive. I handled it better than he did. I was a better golfer than him. He never did it. He never did come to terms with that. He was really a competitor.
Growing up in Leachville, we talked a little bit about this, and you said around the time that he was playing ball, there's only like 1,700 people in Leachville. Did you ever think about what it would be like to grow up somewhere else, or was it just, hey, this is where we are, and this is as good as it's going to get? I mean, I grew up in a small community as well, and it never really set in on me. Well, I wonder what it's like to live in Memphis or Little Rock. I mean, I was always pretty happy growing up in a small community like that.
Well, I was happy in Leachville too, until I graduated from high school. Then when I needed a good job, they were hard to find in Leachville. So that's when I realized that the small town wasn't for me. But when I was growing up, there was no other place I wanted to be. I knew everybody in town. Everybody knew me. It's just when I became an adult that I had to leave.
Amber has sent me some memorabilia, like a picture of the program from Jerry playing in the All-Star game in Little Rock. I guess it would have been after his senior year. What if you remember back on that? What was that experience like, going from a town like Leachville and going down and playing in the All-Star game with with the best guys in the state, being teammates? I mean, what was that like to see your big brother do that?
Oh, that was fantastic. I couldn't believe it. I was about 14 years old when that happened. My mother and I hitchhiked a ride to Little Rock to see him play, and to see him. They had a spotlight on when the players were introduced. They would put a spotlight on them, and they would run out to the middle of the court. And that was, to me, that was just out of this world. To see my big brother do that, and the game, I don't remember that much about the game. I just know that it was a lot of fantastic basketball players. I remember the guy from Texarkana guarded Jerry. He did a pretty good job. Can't remember the guy's name, but it was. And that was that was my first time in Little Rock. I was really impressed. And then, of course, we had to hitch a ride home, but we didn't get home till about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I imagine travel was a little different back then, going from Leachville to Little Rock than what it would be right now.
It was a 2-lane highway all the way.
So, in regards to the basketball as a whole, I mean, we talked a little bit about it, but what are some of your memories maybe after after your brother was done and just watching games in Leachville and you know, playing rivalry games and stuff. Talk a little bit about that, if there's anything that sticks out to you on that.
Well, I did work in Leachville at a supermarket for 2 or 3 years after I graduated. I had a little brother who was a good basketball player. I remember going to his games and how excited the people were, and it was just a basketball town. I know the experience going to those games and how excited the town was, and like I said, the team he was on, they went to the state tournament too, and I think they went to the semifinals as far as they got.
On that state tournament, do you remember where that state tournament was?
The one Jerry played in was at Jonesboro. He played in 2, maybe 3, but the best team they had was when he was a senior. They played at Jonesboro, and they lost in the semifinals to Rogers.
If you were trying to explain to someone that didn't grow up in a small community like this, just how the school and basketball and everything was the backbone, how would you explain it to them?
Very important to the community. Everybody was behind the basketball team. It was a lot like Hoosiers. We would on basketball nights, there'd be small caravans going out of town to the Jonesboro, Blytheville, Monette, wherever they played. And it was fantastic the way that unfolded. But it was really was a lot of similarities to the movie Hoosiers.
So, and ironically, that's one of my favorite movies of all time. Would you say that if you had to put Jerry in that movie, would you say that he was the Jimmy Chitwood character?
Jimmy Chitwood had problems Jerry didn't have, but they were both centerpiece of the team. Yeah, he was. Without Jerry, they wouldn't have been anywhere. Just like they needed Chitwood.
Anything else before we wrap this up here? Is there anything else in regards to your brother Jerry that you want to put out there and let people know? Maybe not just from a basketball perspective, but just, you know, a little bit about maybe Jerry the person after basketball.
Well, he was my big brother, and I admired him a great deal. He went to UT. Went to pharmacy school at UT, Tennessee, and didn't to go to college. And I didn't know what I wanted to do when I got there. And I wanted to be a basketball coach, and he talked me into pharmacy. So he had that kind of influence on me. He could change my life. He could do anything he wanted me to do. He could convince me that was his thing to do. And that's what I'll always remember about him. He's just we didn't always get along, but he was my brother, and you better not say anything bad about him. One of those kind of relationships. We were very close, but we didn't always agree on things. Mike,
I appreciate you taking time to talk with me about Jerry Lee, not just the basketball player, but Jerry Lee the man as well. I really appreciate this, and hopefully we can in some way I can help his legacy, not just as a basketball player, but as a good man, kind of continue to live on.
Great. Well, thank you, Marcus.
Well, joining me now is a former teammate of Jerry's, Mr. Bill Carter. Mr. Carter, I appreciate you taking time to talk with us here on the Final Jump Shot. And we were talking just a little bit before I hit record, and you said that you and Jerry started playing basketball together all the way back in elementary school.
Yes, we did. Yeah, we had a guy who was a combination bus driver and grade school basketball coach. His name was Bill Adams. He's responsible for a lot of the development of the kids that played basketball at Leachville because he started them very early. But Jerry and I started, as I say, in the third grade. We played, just little pickup games like that. And then we moved into junior high. And then in the junior high, our ninth grade year, we were in the finals of the state tournament. And we got beat. But the semifinal game was one that I've always thought was a very unusual game. And this was in the days before they changed the way you line up for free shots. Not the shooter, but the kids that are lined up on the sides. And in those days, each team had one close to the backboard. We were in a game in Bentonville, and we were down 3 points. There were 4 seconds left in the game. I had been fouled shooting, and so I had 2 free shots coming. Our coach called timeout. His name was Clyde Weatherington. He was also the principal at the high school. But Coach Weatherington said, okay, here's what we're going to do. Billy Darrell, you're going to make the first shot. The second shot you're going to not make, but you're going to have the ball come off on Jerry's side. Well, strangely enough, that's exactly the way it happened. I made my first shot. Jerry got the rebound and made a shot and was fouled while he was making that shot. And consequently, we won the game. We had been down 3 points, and we ended up with 4 points. So it was always a very, very strange story around Leachville. In high school, we always played up a division. But in those days, we played 2A, which was the high group. And we played teams from all over. We made trips to Tennessee. We went over to Humboldt and Milan, Tennessee one weekend and played 2 games. We were up in northwest Arkansas around Harrison and Green Forest, and we played a couple of games up there. So we traveled some to play. We played up in Missouri. So we were always looking for good teams to play, and we always had a good schedule. Jerry was a very unusual player. He could handle the ball better than most anybody I've ever seen. And he could drive. He was strong. When he could get in close to the backboard, he could go up and shoot if somebody was hanging on him. He wasn't all that tall. Jerry was about 6 feet, I think, 5'11", maybe 6 feet tall. But he was an all-state basketball player. Every tournament we ever played in, Jerry always made the all-tournament team. Our senior year in high school, he made the all-state team. We happened to get beat in the semifinals of that state tournament.
I want to go back to the game where you missed the free throw for just a second, and okay. Jerry got the rebound. I mean, I just want to bring this to everybody's attention. You know, this is well before the days of the 3-point shot even being a concept, much less being, you know, in the game. And to be down 3 points inside of 10 seconds back in that day was almost, the door was almost shut and locked on your chances of winning the game.
That's true. And it would take an unusual situation like we had. But we couldn't believe we actually pulled it off.
Well, that kind of makes me think of an old saying that my grandpa used to have, and he always talked about that sometimes it's just better to be lucky than to be good, and
that's right.
That might be one of those situations where that fits. So
yeah.
So as you guys were making that state tournament run in senior high, what are some of the memories that stick out to you from that season, and some of the games that really are etched in your memories?
Well, a lot of the memories, good tournament memories I have, are of the tournament that was always in Jonesboro around the middle of December. And it was called the Northeast Arkansas Invitational Tournament.
Yes, sir.
And we won that tournament, I believe, 3 years in a row. And Jerry and I both made all tournament teams every time we won for 3 years. And that was a great opportunity, a great feeling for us, because we were a small school. And obviously we were small. We didn't have enough boys to play football. So that town Leachville was a basketball town. And I've often said about Leachville, if the way they backed us and took care of us, well, if anybody wanted to burgle a whole town, all they had to do was wait for a Friday night when we had an away basketball game. And there wasn't anybody left in town hardly. So we had great support from that. And the Boosters Club took good care of the kids. We had some kids that couldn't buy shoes. They bought shoes for them. Things like that. And growing up, I think, in that era and in that kind of an environment, we learned a lot about teamwork, which is what I think was so important to us. We were fortunate to have wonderful coaches, and they were more interested in developing us as individual human beings than winning games. But winning games was important. Absolutely. That was what we were there for. But you learn teamwork, and you learn to take instruction. And if we followed the coach, if we did what the coach told us to do, we'd win the ball game. A lot of it evolved around Jerry, setting screens for Jerry, because he was a dead aim shooter. You get him out around the top of the keyhole and set a screen for him, and if the guy guarding you didn't switch off and get to Jerry, Jerry's going to nail the basket, and he would do that. And most of our games in 11th and 12th grade, he'd score anywhere from 20 to 30 points a game. But a lot of our offense was set around Jerry because he could shoot the ball like that. So, again, a lot of teamwork.
I want to clarify something, too, for people that may not know the history of how the game has changed. Over that time, there was no shot clock. There was no possession arrows either. So if you had the ball at the end of, let's say you had the ball at the end of the first quarter, you got the ball to start the second quarter too, so you could really control the pace if you were playing against someone like Jerry, who was a very high scoring player. To try to slow him down, you could hold the ball and hang on to it. So I imagine playing tough defense really came in to play for your team as well, because that was the only way you were going to get the ball back.
Well, that's right. And Coach Pinnell, Doy Pinnell, his philosophy was defense wins your ball games. And so he was always emphasizing defense. And we played like that. One thing you had to do with Doy Pinnell is you had to be in condition That old gymnasium at Leachville, in the summertime, when we were even out of school, in the summertime, 2 nights a week, we had to go down to the gym and work out. And in the hot summertime, with that black top on that old gym, he would go down there during the day and close that thing up so it was hotter than blue blazes. And we went in there, we never touched a basketball. All we did was conditioning exercises. And in those days, a lot of boys in high school smoked. And his philosophy was, if you boys want to smoke, you go ahead and smoke. As long as when I tell you to get out there and do something, you can do it. Well, I promise you, there wasn't any way you could do that and smoke. Because we always finished up what we call running the hill. That old gym had fixed bleachers. And you would start on one end and you would run up to the top bleacher, and you'd run along the bleachers to the end, down the bleachers, across the floor, the gym floor, up the other side of the bleachers, and you ran up and down in July and August. And I lived a block from the gym, and there's many a night on the way home I had to stop and actually, I know this doesn't sound real good, but I would empty my stomach because I was just so worn out. But nobody could run with us. That was one of the things we had, was we were in great shape, and we could run. We could go and go. So, but Jerry was the team leader. There wasn't any question about that. And he was also my best friend. You may know that Jill DeKay, Amber's mother, was my best girlfriend that I never had a date with. I met her first day of grade school, and she and I competed on grades all through 12 years. But she and Jerry and Julia, my wife, and we probably had more double dates together than we ever had single dates before we got married. And we all married the same summer. Jerry and I, as I say, grew up together, and I really miss him. I wish I could talk to him today.
To expand on that, of you guys being so tight away from basketball, you mentioned the double dates and going out. What were some of the things that you guys like to do together outside of basketball, other obviously than take your girlfriends on double dates? Were you guys fishermen, or did you go hunting or anything?
No, we worked.
Worked.
I grew up on a cotton field, and Jerry's stepdad was a cotton farmer. So most of the time during the days like that, we were working on farms. We didn't have a whole lot of time like that on weekends. We'd usually double date on Saturday night, go to a movie or something like that. And then maybe Sunday afternoon, we'd ride around and all and just kill time together. But that's, as you may know well, that's kind of the thing you do in a small town.
Yes, sir.
You learn to drag Maine.
I can relate. I can definitely relate to that.
and we would do that, and and a lot of times too, there was a swimming pool at Manila, and they were arch rivals of ours, 8 miles away. They were arch rivals. They had a good basketball team. Just a quick story about Manila. Our senior year, between the 2 tournaments we played them and our regular season games, we played that team 4 times. We won all 4 times, and the total point difference in the 4 games together was 6 points.
Oh my goodness.
We beat them 2 points in 2 games and 1 point in the other 2 games.
And with that being beating your bitter rival that way, that had to have a little extra sugar on top of it, did it not?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And we knew the guys. Of course, we all knew all of them because the community swimming pool we used was there at Manila. And so we knew all those guys, and they knew us. And it was a friendly rival, I will say that. But I could never, Jerry and I always said, I cannot imagine how it feels to lose 4 games by 6 points. I cannot imagine how that would feel. Because I think our senior year, we played 36 games and lost 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I want to talk to you a little bit. Earlier, you had mentioned that you guys played up a classification and you named off all the traveling and stuff that you guys would do to go play higher level competition. How many times did you guys go into one of these bigger cities in Missouri or in Tennessee or maybe down in central Arkansas or northwest Arkansas and to play a bigger school? And you guys went in and caught them off guard because they see you guys coming in from this little bitty town in the northeast corner of Arkansas, and they think, well, these guys can't be that good.
Well, very frankly, two of the games we lost that senior year was up in northwest Arkansas, Harrison and Green Forest both. But both the Green Forest team had 2 guys that ended up playing at the University of Arkansas. And the Harrison team had some really good players. I know that some of them went to college, played in college. I don't remember where they went. But those 2 schools were tough. And we were on their home ground too. But we didn't lose by big margins. But they were better teams. They really were. And the one guy from Green Forest, I cannot remember his name, was a starter for the University of Arkansas for 3 out of the 4 years he went to school there. So he was a heck of a player.
I keep going back to the travel because that was a lot of travel in that day for teams to go and play games. I mean, you were almost on like the travel schedule of like an all-star team.
Well, yeah, we would leave on Friday and drive. Well, either when we went to Tennessee, we would go we always went on Friday and played a game on Friday night and played the other team on Saturday night. And when we would go to northwest Arkansas, Jonesboro would go with us, and we alternated games. We'd play Harrison, say, Friday night. They'd play Green Forest Friday night. Then Saturday night, we would switch teams and play. And Blytheville went with us to Tennessee, to Humboldt and Milan, Tennessee, doing the same thing, switching teams Friday and Saturday night. So we had a pretty good group that traveled. You got to know those guys pretty well too.
Yeah, plenty of time on the bus there to have conversation because there were no iPhones to keep everybody busy during that day, so it was a lot of conversation. I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. No, we didn't have phones, but we had a lot of fun. I mean, and it was good, clean fun. Some of the games you see today. It's hard to understand what sportsmanship is.
Sure. Well, Mr. Carter, I want to finish up with this here. You've told us about Jerry Lee, the player, and Jerry, your best friend. You know, if I had to explain who Jerry was to someone who had never heard of him, and I had about 30 or 60 seconds to kind of sum him up, how would I go about doing that?
I think you would say Jerry Atkeison was a young man raised with a stepfather who was very strict, did not appreciate the talent that his stepson had on a basketball court, didn't go to very many of Jerry's games. But Jerry intended to be a good player. He worked at it, and he became a really, really good high school basketball player. And as you probably know, he did go to college on a scholarship, basketball scholarship, to the college in Batesville. But he was a hard worker when it came to basketball. When it came to doing his homework and all that, he wasn't all that dedicated. But GK helped him with all of that, and no question about it, he was an intelligent young man. But you never knew anybody that loved to read any more than Jerry. If you were in a car going to Tennessee, he's going to be reading a book. And a lot of his intelligence came from what he read. So he was just a fine young guy. And we got apart for quite a long, long time. I went my way, he went his way after we graduated from different schools. I had a different career. I was in the military. He didn't go in the military. But we still communicated with each other. And like I said, he was, no question, the best friend I had all through school, from grade school through high school.
Well, Mr. Carter, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us about the relationship that you and Jerry had both on the floor and off the floor. And I really appreciate it. And hopefully we can use this to kind of keep the legacy of Leachville Lion basketball alive, as well as the legacy that you and Jerry and your teammates left behind with those outstanding seasons you had.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure, Marcus.
I want to say a very special thank you to Amber and Mike Atkeison, as well as Mr. Billy Darrell Carter, for taking time to share their memories with me and all of you on Jerry Atkeison. I hope everyone enjoyed listening to this as much as I enjoyed putting it together. I also want to thank my good friend Randy Myers for his assistance in helping me with pre-production on this episode. And lastly, I want to thank everyone who has taken time out of their schedule to listen to the Final Jump Shot. We've got many more stories planned, and we're going to be releasing them as soon as we can in the near future. Be sure that you turn on your notifications or subscribe to the Final Jump Shot from your favorite podcast provider to make sure that you never miss a future episode. If you're on social media, go find our Facebook page and give it a like. Or if X, formerly known as Twitter, is more your speed, search Final Jump Shot and follow our account. Remember, just because the schools are gone doesn't mean the legacies can't live on forever. I'm your host, Marcus Carlton, and you've been listening to the Final Jump Shot podcast.
You've been listening to the Final Jump Shot, a Cam Productions podcast. Subscribe to the Final Jump Shot to ensure you never miss an episode.